Hello. Thanks. I haven't done it yet. So I'm part of Assemble. We're a design collective from London. This is me. These are some of my colleagues. And this is a photograph we took on a frame of one of our buildings. And it was kind of made to imitate the Amish family. I don't know if you know about the Amish, but they're a kind of type of community from America who are known to be building stuff for themselves as a part of a kind of social collective action. And this is a very inspiring image for us, even though it's a bit romantic. So began working about 9 years ago when we graduated from architecture school. Some people studied other things. And we really wanted just to make something in the city which is immediate and kind of working with materials. So we built this temporary cinema, and we used kind of industrial materials like roofing insulation, and got sponsorship from different manufacturers. And it was a fun little thing whilst we kind of worked for more traditional offices, kind of detailing toilets and other things like that. And it was fun because the project was kind of a small architectural project where we designed a space, but it was also the design of an event and design of a place. So we curated a film program and dressed up and invited our friends, and they had a kind of theatrical element of the raising of the curtain at the end of each film, where you became kind of part of the street again. And I think since that project, we grew as an organization. And very much continued our interest in kind of materiality and public space. And since then, we've done lots of different things. So we've done furniture, so working with a forestry organization in London, getting off kind of discarded bits of wood and kind of joining them together to make tables and chairs. So this is a project for a park we did a few years ago. We worked in Japan, where we worked with local manufacturers and craftspeople to make a little brewery tasting space, and we used a kind of indigo dyeing techniques to stain the wood. Also work a lot with play and kind of playing with ideas of play. So this is a foam manifestation of a brutalist playground. So those brutalist buildings were popular in the UK and other countries, kind of concrete, rough, really kind of sculptural, and we made them into foam playable things. So these are literal copies of some brutalist architecture. We've also worked on traveling exhibitions. This is an exhibition about Lina Barbadi's work, someone that we very much interested in as a practice. She was a Brazilian architect. We made some furniture for that, using paper and concrete to make concrete lighter. We mixed and prototyped it in our studio. And we also kind of interested in, making as more of a social urban situation, and many spaces in London and places like London are finding it harder and harder to have space to make big things and to manufacture things. We made this study of businesses around our old studio in East London, kind of drawing all the different things that are happening, all the manufacturers, all the stage set designers, all the radio stations, and kind of storage facilities, because often when new developments come along, they say that there's nothing there, but obviously there's a lot of stuff happening. And so one of our early projects was this idea of setting up a makerspace, which is obviously a very trendy thing right now, but maybe back in 2011 it was still quite new in England. This idea of a library for tools, a place where you can make things and socialize. And we set up this organization in London, in Black Horse Road in North London, in a kind of industrial area, trying to think about the different ways in which kind of new industry and education can come together in the city. And it's functioning as a library, so you can come and have membership and use wood and metal work tools, and you can also go on courses. So there's a lot of popular evening things like stone carving, metal working, people make guitars, whatever stuff there. And it's still running, it's been 5 years now. It's called Black Horse Workshop. I think over time, this really interest in co-working spaces and the idea of different disciplines sharing space and knowledge was quite important to us. And so we, we've been looking for new homes to move to like bigger spaces and share with more people. And this image illustrates this ambition of, someone might be doing yoga, there's someone building a giant horse, this is a photography studio that everyone gets to share, and this idea of an industrial space, so you can get deliveries, and I guess the economy and of this, and I guess it's sustainable in a way. You're all sharing the same resources. You don't need your own photography studio. You don't need your own whatever, necessarily even computer. If you want, you could have a computer lab like at school. And yeah, it's kind of a dreamy idea. But we kind of have that. We've managed to find a new space where we share with lots of other designers and makers and musicians and journalists in what's called Sugar House Studios. Oops, sorry. So you can see there's, all the different businesses here. And we also have a kind of collective food sharing. So when we were starting out, didn't have much money to have lunch, but also the industrial area where we had our studio didn't really necessarily have any nice places to eat, didn't have your whatever latte. And so we started cooking for each other, so taking turns making lunch for all the other people in Assemble. And we still do that now, which I think is amazing. So this is a point system which we devised. So if you cook lunch, you get 8 points taken off, and if you eat, then you get a point added on. And so there's a kind of natural evolution of who cooks. Kind of once every 2 weeks, you end up cooking. And this really, because we have a non-hierarchical structure at the moment, and it's really, the point system is quite an important factor in controlling our behavior. So if you're late for a group meeting, then you get a point added on, which is a good incentive. So I think it's an important element for our practice is to have space to make a mess, to have space to prototype things. Even if we work on a big project, a bigger building, we still like to prototype certain elements of it which can then be built by someone else. And so this is me and a colleague trying out a different toilet, so casting some things, using an old mold from a toilet factory. And we've managed to kind of use this space to develop bigger projects. So this is a test for a tile facade for a new gallery in London. So this is using a kind of corrugated, like a very cheap corrugated concrete roofing tile, and just staining it with different colors to make it more special. And this is a one-to-one test of a facade for this building, where we basically just try to work out a system to make this new type of product viable. And I think, for us it's quite important, this idea of looking at things with fresh eyes, something which can be quite mundane and cheap, making it into a valuable product. And so we built this building. It was completed last year, the Goldsmiths Art Gallery. So it's part of a university in South London. And it's a new gallery for some of its, for kind of an emerging global pool of artists, really. But it's also part of the university. So this is it in real life. Yes, and we've also kind of tried to develop models of new build that correlate with our desire to have this kind of shared, affordable space in a big city. And so our first building that we did was called Yard House. And the idea was to use really, again, kind of affordable, off-the-shelf industrial materials, so timber frame, and then you can see this cladding is prefabricated insulated panels, very standard ones that you get for whatever kind of out-of-town storage facilities, to make it cheap and robust. We built it ourselves. Well, I didn't actually build it, but we as a group, as an architecture collective, managed the construction, which is quite interesting, I think, to a traditional model where you, I guess, subcontracted to someone else. And then the different artists that moved into the spaces, they kind of inhabited the space how they wanted, and some people built walls, some people didn't build walls, and we were also quite interested in the economic model of this kind of space. So if you don't build the walls is obviously cheaper, so that opens up opportunities for what artists can do. And then, you know, it was all very off the shelf and prefabricated, but we wanted to still make it special and celebrate the idea of, you know, making stuff in the city. And so we handmade the facade. So we basically found this book from the 60s about tile making and basically borrowed some of the ideas from there and welded together this metal frame and then built loads and loads of colorful tiles that went on the wall. And we, you know, it was just, we had an idea about different types of colors, but then obviously each batch was slightly different, and that was fine. Kind of the idea of chance and improvisation is quite important in our work, so we just did it and then arranged them to some sort of system which was about kind of cold colors and warm colors, and then in between you have sort of grays and yellows. So this is it from the neighboring site. And it was kind of, yeah, this project was quite crazy for us because it really connected us to the world of social media. Oh yeah, it's a backdrop to events, so we like to put on parties, and it's an interesting setting. But yeah, we found a lot of people coming to this building to take a selfie in front of the wall, not knowing who we are or what the building's about. And we had to, unfortunately, sell the building because we didn't own the land, so we sold it to someone else. And we still have people coming looking for the building. And we've also seen it on lots of phones. So yeah, it's crazy. I wish we kind of were a bit more clever about our marketing, and maybe we should make our own phone cover. Yeah, so I guess this is about our base, but we also have worked kind of in other places in the world, and I think finding it more and more interesting how you manage to really embed yourself in a place, and really the project being about a place rather than maybe one-off thing. And so we've spent, you know, still are working there now, but since 2013 began our work in Liverpool. So this is a Granby area of Liverpool, which historically was a very diverse and kind of thriving area, a lot of kind of working class and a lot of immigrants. You know, it's a port city. But it's also known for the 1980s riots, or uprisings as they call them in Liverpool, which had a lot to do with kind of racial and class inequalities. And you know, there's a lot of turmoil and change in cities. It wasn't the only place in the UK, which has come with the riots, and a lot of kind of planning decisions to try and improve the urban situation, which, you know, now seem a little bit fraught. At the time were, you know, quite dramatic. So the plan was to de-densify the areas to make the land more valuable. So you can see this plan of kind of demolishing a lot of the old Victorian dense streets. And so these two maps show, you know, 1950, when these are all businesses and industries in pink and blue, and 2016, and the kind of new suburban typology that came about instead. And they basically run out of money with these 4 streets. And you can see how much life goes on there. So we've met, yeah, you can see it now, beautiful. And some of the, yes, this is one of the streets, of the 4 streets that remained. And it's quite sad because it was just, you know, just left there to rot, you know, because the properties were bought by the government, but then nothing was done to them. And a lot of the valuables, like the roofing tiles and kind of fireplaces, and some of the front doors were taken away, and so it just deteriorated. And now, obviously, the political change has come about, but before this, there was a lot of active, you know, there were still a few active residents remaining who wanted to just do it themselves and keep up the area and the pride in where they live. And they formed a community land trust, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's a kind of type of land ownership which is owned by the community. And, you know, they would be cleaning the streets themselves, watering and planting the streets, when, you know, the government wouldn't even send the bin men there, which is, you know, crazy, but amazing creativity as well from the residents. And they set up a market as well, which is still running now. And when we met them a few years ago, they wanted us to help kind of regenerate the area with, a series of small interventions. It wasn't anything, it's not going to be anything grand. It's quite a small group of people and budgets and stuff. But we wanted to see it as a holistic picture. How can you, how can you see an area as a place of work, leisure, life? And so we put together a document which kind of just brainstormed some ideas about what you can do with some of the old houses that were left empty, what you can do with things which, buildings that were still in good conditions, buildings that were in really bad conditions, what it means to work there as well. So you don't want to just create housing, you want to have business and industry as well. So yeah, the condition of some of these houses is really sad and awful. You can see here. So we made some models, architectural models. This is a 1:20 model of some of our interiors. And just being, I guess, sensitive to what's already there, not trying to spend huge amounts of money rebuilding everything, but saying, well, if the floor has fallen through, then it can be a double height space, etc. Kind of being accepting of what is there. And so kind of opening up the ceilings of these old Victorian homes. And very, modest housing. But I think the key really is to try and, was really trying to create special moments, like the details of the door handles or like storage systems in the kitchen. And then the building, which was in a really bad condition in the middle of the street, we turned it into a communal shared space, a winter garden. So this is the dream image for the winter garden. Maybe not so tropical in the UK, but this idea of a place where the whole street can gather. And it's been built. We just completed it this year, which is really great for the community there. Quite simple. I mean, it was a lot of engineering to keep the building intact as it is, added the roof, working with the local horticulturist to plant inside the trees. And there's a residency space on the other side of the building where kind of a rotating artist would come and work with the garden. And as part of this Granby project, there was also this idea of creating special elements for the homes, the handles, the fireplaces, all the things that were maybe stripped away during the kind of empty years, to bring those back and to bring back a sense of pride and a sense of beauty, something that's beautiful that's made in an area which is known for kind of riots and poverty. And so we started to basically use some of the demolition rubble from the construction sites around there to make fireplaces for the homes. And so you can see this is where the winter garden now is, but we were basically drying all these fireplaces there, and then you can see them in the home. And so we, through that kind of initial kind of design instinct to create these things, we then set up Gramby Workshop, which is now still running as a social enterprise in Liverpool. And we launched it during the Turner Prize in 2015. And yeah, the idea was to create kind of an array of objects for the home, which were all made in Granby area. So fireplaces, also, we used to have textiles. We kind of stopped on that for now. So chairs, lampshades, plates, cups. And the kind of beginnings were all about simple techniques, something that people can learn quite quickly, isn't necessarily very high tech or doesn't require a lot of investment because we didn't have much at the time. And so, but still this idea of improvisation and chance for each object to look different. So these door handles, for example, are made in a simple barbecue, and we just wrapped each one in banana skins and wood chips, and yeah, they came out the way they came out. But then, we've evolved and kind of getting into more industrial tools and mixing this kind of handmade improvisation with industrial machines, which make things a lot quicker and cheaper. So we were playing around with this extruder that's usually used for making bricks, and kind of making different jigs for it to make differently shaped tiles. And then now I've got this round press, which is very fun. So you know, we have molds in there, and then the thing just comes down and presses into them. So we used the round press to make thousands and thousands of tiles. So this is the tiles exhibited at the Venice Biennale 2 years ago. And then after the exhibition, they were then reused in a garden in Venice, and then some of them were kind of given away to people who wanted them. These are the tiles. We also recently did a residency in Japan, part of the Shiseido exhibition. We went to Mexico, where we did some firings in a wood kiln, and kind of collaborated with experts there who know a lot more about ceramics than we do. So we created these different kind of stackable cups, and the idea was, again, to through having different molds stacked in different ways, you create chance and improvisation, even though you have a kind of system. And I think, you know, I don't know if you can read this, but these are the rules of the workshop. You know, it's to initiate chance and improvisation so that each product is different. Use experimental processes, you know, but be simple in the form, so not try and overcomplicate things for production. And it has to be enjoyable and challenging, because I guess the biggest thing in manufacturing is, you know, it's like, unless you robotize it, you don't want to be doing the same thing every day and kind of not use your mental capacities. And to support employment in the area, which will encourage more and more people to move back into the area to live. And recently, we've launched the 100% recyclable plates and cups. So we've been working with a lot of other manufacturers in the area of North England, such as the Armitage Shanks toilet manufacturer and other people in Stoke-on-Trent, kind of reusing other ceramics and into new products. And so another area where we've been working for the last 3 years is New Orleans in Louisiana. I don't know how much you guys know about New Orleans, but it's it's a very complicated place. This is the kind of site that we're dealing with. You know, it's in a kind of very low density neighborhood in a part which was, you know, partly affected by Katrina in 2005, partly just kind of has always had issues with low employment, and you know, it's kind of quite segregated. This is a kind of light industrial building that used to be a car mechanics. This is it from the outside. And so we were invited by this organization that have been building up an experimental art school there. This idea of, you know, empowering people to have access to kind of elite education that, you know, a lot of us here have access to, but kind of trying to reach a different community. And so they started this thing called the gun buyback, which I think a lot of Americans know about. I didn't know about it before, but it's where they invite people to come and bring their guns to be then given money. I don't know how like successful it is, but it's an interesting model which they kind of, you know, began the school to kind of try and get to know some of the people who might be interested in taking part. They set up a recording studio, a music recording studio, which produces a lot of amazing artists. It was recently on the BBC radio, some of the musicians there. And a community growing garden, so somewhere where you can learn about like healthy food and you know, what a vegetable is, gardening, and having a different connection to the earth, you know, just a very simple one that you can grow your own food, especially somewhere like New Orleans where the weather is amazing and you can pretty much grow anything, it seems. A lot of people don't necessarily know that. There's also fashion. So this Terrace is one of the guys at the school, he was at the school, is very, he was making his own clothes just because he wants to. And kind of started to look deeper into the culture of costuming and celebration and fashion in a kind of more traditional sense in New Orleans, and I don't know how much you know about Mardi Gras, but Mardi Gras Indian culture is a particular part of that event and has a lot of meaning and history and narrative. And I think as an outsider, it's just absolutely incredible, the kind of intricacy of craft and dedication that goes into that, but also as a form of communication, it's spectacular. So once a year, communities that are taking part in black masking are making these suits. Each year is a different new suit. And also there's like weekly parades where different people have a kind of jazz parade, which has a lot of connections to jazz funerals and the history of jazz in New Orleans. Yeah, these are caramel curves. Check them out, they're on Instagram. So yeah, we were invited to be part of this experimental art school in different ways, kind of designing a new building for them, and then kind of ended up designing a textile and fashion department. So we were looking at, how you can create an ecosystem where students can be empowered through making things and learning about things and connecting back to the industries of New Orleans. And I guess there was, a lot of interest in recycled garments and alternative approach to fabrics. A lot of interest in kind of growing things, homegrown fibers and homegrown dyes. And just looking at different equipment, kind of more industrial equipment that you could bring into the space, which people don't normally have access to. So it was kind of started with some research into very old techniques as well, like weaving. There's kind of digital knitting, printing, dyeing with natural ingredients, and alternative materials, such as there's a lot of research into kind of growing bacteria, leather, and salmon skins and other stuff like that, kombucha. And we collaborated with a few people on the pilot phase. So we worked with Big Chief de Monde Melanson, who makes these suits. They were recently exhibited at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. But he beads these pieces. I don't know if you can see, but this is made up of tiny individual beads. And they tell his story that he wants to tell. We worked with Kenneth Eze, who's a kind of rising fashion star. This is Naomi Campbell, this is Kenneth, in Nigeria, and he, again, is kind of interested in how you employ traditional weaving techniques with contemporary design. And he's kind of investing very much in Nigerian crafts community. And Corolla Jones, who works a lot with natural dyes, and that's something that she's been doing all her life. As an expert at it. Faustine Steinmetz, who's an amazing craftswoman from London, who again kind of works with hands-on techniques in fashion and I guess slow fashion. So we were developing the building and kind of planting the courtyard, opening the space. I think this bit is kind of boring really, but just making it into a cool space to be. And we set up this loom. Oh, and yeah, we tried to keep it simple and punched these windows in the existing building for, kind of exciting openings. We set up a program for the different classes that would run during the pilot phase. It was happening last year for 3 months. This is a printing press. This is like a sublimation die printer, which is very popular. So you can basically impress any image onto fabric. And then we did the first show like about a year ago. And since then, it's been, this is from the show. Since then, it's been growing into kind of an establishing fashion school. Some of the garments. So a lot of these are made using kind of recycled fabrics, and this is indigo dyed. And then recently we took part in the Chicago Architecture Biennale, where we collaborated with the Material Institute, with the students from the fashion school, to create something. So it was an interesting project where I guess it's kind of like a student art show, but a real life one. And we got these tufting guns, which I used normally to make carpets, and kind of played around with people making garments from them. And that was really fun. So we had about a month to learn how to use this machine. And we also tried to use natural dyes to dye all the recycled yarn. So this is this turmeric, indigo leaf, hibiscus, cochineal, there's like dried bugs, avocado stone, some black beans, this is alum. And yeah, just playing around with dyeing yarns and winding yarns. It's kind of a research into some future products that we might have there. And then some of the fashion that was made. This image is very saturated, but these are actually natural colors. And so, yeah, one student made these crazy boots, which are really cool. And then this guy made a jacket. And so we had a show opening in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. And this video can tell you a bit more about it.
I taught the basics of how to stitch beads and how to string them on lines and so on. But in the same essence, I taught the culture. Because some people live in New Orleans all their life and didn't know nothing about the Indians.
Fashion is just second nature for a lot of the Mardi Gras Indians and people who dress up every year for Mardi Gras, make a costume every year.
My favorite thing is Second Lines. I just love the fashion there. It feels so New Orleans street culture, but it has a really particular flavor.
Oh. Oh no. Oh shit. Oh no, the video, sorry, this must finished. I don't know, that's weird. Well, there's a longer version of this video on our website. Yeah, I guess this concludes my presentation. I think the important thing really still for us is how do you bring an excitement and pleasure in materials that we have and kind of development of new products with a kind of culture and community and living together. And that is a big challenge still. Thank you so much.